Hey, uh, welcome everyone to our Defend Migrants press conference. Um, good morning. Uh, if we go to the next slide. Today, this is our flow of our press conference. We'll start off with an introduction and we'll have six speakers. And then after that, we'll have the opportunity to have questions and a portion, and then we'll do a closing announcements. Next slide, please. Just a little bit of an introduction. Good morning again. My name is Freddie with Migrante USA, an alliance of Filipino migrants and workers organizations dedicated to fighting for the rights and welfare of Filipinos in the US and for genuine democracy in the Philippines. I am also the vice chair of BAYAN USA, an alliance of 26 progressive Filipino organizations in the US representing students, scholars, women, workers, artists, and youth, among others. It is the first and largest international chapter of BAYAN Philippines. And my co-MC today is, pass it to Sally.
Hello, good morning, everyone. I will be emceeing today for this morning's press conference. My name is Sally Corpus. I'm the Education Director for Kabataan Alliance. We are an alliance of Filipino youth and student organizations coming from high schoolers, college students, and even middle schoolers, with a range of working class and migrant youth as well, fighting for the rights and welfare of Filipinos in our schools, communities, and in the Philippines. For both Migrante and Kabataan Alliance, we are also conveners of the Filipino American Agenda, a campaign that amplifies the ongoing concerns and demands, identifies through our existing local campaigns that actively seeks input from community members to address issues that's affecting Filipinos in our community.
And to give context to why we are here today is the launching of the different Filipino Migrants campaign. It is a campaign led by Migrante and BAYAN USA. Across the country, we have been responding to the concerns of the Filipino community and holding the Philippine government accountable for its role to protect Filipino migrants. There have been many efforts of Filipino communities across the country to support each other and empower people to take actions before, during, and after the elections, really to help our kababayan, to help us be prepared, ensure that Filipinos are not misinformed, and to especially exercise our collective rights to demand for protection. We've been doing phone barrages and phone calls to the Philippine Embassy and consulates last week. We've been rallying and submitting petitions to consulates with our migrants' demands. We've also been bringing migrant workers to various talakayans, both locally and nationally, to educate about the political situation and what actions we need to do together to fight.
And then we can start with our first speaker. Next slide, please. So for our first speaker is Jacqueline Mariano, the Executive Director of Mission to End Modern Day Slavery. Jackie will share what we expect from the Trump presidency. Let's welcome Jackie.
Thank you, Sally and Freddie. Again, my name is Jacqueline Mariano. I am the Executive Director of the Mission to End Modern Slavery. The Mission to End Modern Slavery, or MEMS, is a nonprofit organization based in Queens, New York, that aims to build a survivor-led movement working in community to end human trafficking and wage theft towards social and economic justice. Next month, which is National Trafficking Awareness Month, MEMS is launching a new program called Building the Strength to Break the Chains to reinvigorate our mission as the second Trump administration begins. We work directly with survivors of labor trafficking and wage theft to build their capacity to organize and run campaigns to bring their traffickers and employers to justice. Under a second Trump administration, MEMS is fully expecting the administration to continue its rhetoric of criminalizing migrants to justify the intensification of criminal and immigration enforcement by local police and Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE. He will fuel the already active crimmigration system that places migrants in a deportation pipeline by over-policing immigrant communities and lodging racially discriminatory criminal charges and convictions. Trump ran on a campaign promising mass deportations, but it is hard to tell at this moment exactly how his plans will be implemented, because mass deportation at the scale he promises will need a lot of public resources and a guarantee that local jurisdictions will cooperate with the federal government. So we must pay attention to the attitudes of the states and cities that we live in and adjust our strategies for organizing to whether our local jurisdictions express a willingness to cooperate with the federal government's plans, such as honoring ICE detainer requests for migrants who are in criminal proceedings, or allowing ICE to roam the streets in our cities in joint operations with local police to conduct enforcement and raids. Just as an example, here in New York City, which is a supposed sanctuary city and run by a Democratic mayor, Mayor Eric Adams. Mayor Adams has already met with Thomas Homan, who Trump has identified as his so-called border czar, who will likely lead ICE operations. And Mayor Adams, while he's facing federal criminal charges himself for corruption and misuse of public election campaigns funds, he is flaming this divisive rhetoric of deporting bad criminal immigrants while protecting good ones. And it's already impacting our communities here. While the Trump administration plans are especially worrisome, MEMS recognizes that deportations and harsh immigration enforcement were already taking place under Democratic administrations like Biden and Obama. In the last months of the Biden administration, MEMS has been supporting the campaign for justice for Denmark and Jovi, led by Migrante New Jersey and Migrante New York. Denmark and Jovi are an example of how the US government pushes migrant workers into the crimmigration pipeline by targeting them with harsh criminal charges that escalate to unforgiving immigration consequences. Denmark and Jovi in October were arrested wrongfully for defending themselves against a violent patient in their workplace in New Jersey. They are certified nursing assistants. They now face aggravated assault charges. And when they were released from jail, ICE immediately detained them because they are non-citizens who made contact with the criminal legal system. Now they're essentially being punished for alleged crimes while having difficulty fighting their criminal case in immigration detention. MEMS has been supporting Denmark, Jovi, their friends and family to obtain support from the Philippine Consulate and Embassy. They applied for Assistance to Nationals Fund, which is meant to support Philippine nationals in distress and who are facing legal issues. However, the process has been very convoluted. We are getting to know the process for applying for Assistance to Nationals Funds and the rules and regulations by engaging with it. So actually the engagement by the Florida 15, who are trafficking survivors, their request for ATN to pay for fees to participate in virtual court hearings against their trafficker, Jojo Villanueva, who's facing criminal prosecution in the Philippines right now. Their advocacy is allowing us to understand how exactly to advocate for ATN for Denmark and Jovi. We did find out a couple of days ago that Denmark and Jovi's request for ATN was approved, but the process by which getting those funds from the Philippine government to Denmark and Jovi's friends and families has been very overcomplicated and based on bureaucratic rules and red tape. And we really have to push the governments to efficiently offer the support they claim to want to give and be critical of the messages that they send to their communities. My last point is that MEMS is very critical of the Philippine ambassador's message to Filipino migrants to self-deport. We believe that it is legally misleading, it is fear-mongering, and it is promoting a really defeatist attitude in the Filipino community. It is important to get trusted legal advice around the individual impacts of departing from the United States, as simply leaving may lead to unexpected and undesirable consequences, depending on one's immigration legal history, especially if people desire to return here to work and be reunited with their families. The ambassador notes that Filipinos still will have many opportunities to work in the United States, and that he and the embassy are working to connect prospective migrants from the Philippines to US employers, but encouraging this while telling Filipinos to leave the US under a Trump administration, treats migrant Filipinos like commodities for employers in the US, and constructs Filipino workers as dispensable and replaceable without addressing the root issues in the Philippines that force people to migrate and become vulnerable to exploitation, human trafficking, and harsh immigration policies abroad. We must not let these messages water down the fighting spirit and resistance of migrants. A strong community is our best defense, so that we may continue to live and work with dignity. Thank you.
Salamat, Jackie. It's clear that the criminalization of migrants has been happening for a long time, and the Trump administration will further intensify it. We can see this in the case of Denmark and Jovi, who have been criminalized for defending themselves and simply doing their jobs. Thank you also for emphasizing the need for us to, yeah, collectively fight and just not listen to what the government says, and it could be misleading, and to really trust in our fight together. Before our next speaker, I do want to remind everyone for questions, please submit them to our questions person in the chat. We will compile them for the Q&A portion later, where our speakers will be able to answer them. Thank you. Now, for our next speaker, we have Veronica, the Youth Relations Officer of the Filipino Association of Workers and Immigrants, or PAWIS. Veronica will share experiences of caregivers and their efforts to empower workers to take action during this time. Let's welcome Veronica.
Hello, magandang umaga sa ating lahat. Ako po si Veronica, ang Youth Relations Officer ng PAWIS at isang migranteng kabataan na tumutulong sa pag-oorganisa ng mga migranteng manggagawa dito sa lugar namin sa Bay Area, partikular na mga caregiver. Sa Santa Clara County, ang mga Pilipinong low-wage earners ay kadalasan nakikita sa caregiving industry dito sa Amerika. At sa industriyang ito, makikita ang mga bagong dating na migranteng Pilipino. Maging sila man ay mga green card holder o mga undocumented. Base sa survey na ginawa namin itong summer, 38% ng mga caregiver ay 51 to 60 years old at 30% naman ay 61 to 70 years old. Marami rin sa kanila ay mga dating professional sa Pilipinas, ngunit pinili nila magtrabaho sa care home dahil ito ay isang trabaho na madaling pasukan. Walang espesyal na training at hindi kailangan na maraming experience. Ngunit sa kabila ng pagiging breadwinner ng kanilang mga pamilya, maraming migranteng manggagawa sa caregiving industry ang nagiging biktima ng wage theft, human trafficking at retaliation. 90% sa kanila ay regular na nagpapadala ng remittance sa Pilipinas. Kaya't akala ng kanilang mga pamilya na maganda ang kanilang kalagayan dito. Pero sa totoo lang, marami sa kanila ay nakararanas na matitinding pagsasamantala. Isa sa mga pangunahing issue ay ang wage theft. Halimbawa, ang mga undocumented na caregiver na nagtatrabaho sa care home bilang live-in caregiver, sila ay nagtatrabaho 24 oras kada araw, 7 araw kada linggo. Ngunit, ang kanilang sahod ay katumbas lamang ng 8 oras ng trabaho kada araw. Ayon sa aming survey, 57% ng mga caregiver sa county namin ang nakararanas ng ganitong uri ng exploitation. At dahil sa banta ng retaliation din, na mawalan sila ng trabaho at mapalayas sa care home, marami sa kanila ang tahimik at hindi nagsasabi ng kanilang kalagayan. Masakit din na makita na ang konsulado ng Pilipinas ay walang sapat na suporta o programa para sa mga migranteng manggagawa. Kung ikukumpara natin sa Mexican Consulate na nagbibigay ng impormasyon ukol sa mga karapatan ng manggagawa at legal na tulong, ang ating gobyerno ay tila hindi nakikinig sa mga pangangailangan ng mga manggagawang Pilipino sa US. Sa kabila ng pagkakaroon ng higit sa 7,000 care home sa California, tila hindi nakikita ng gobyernong Pilipinas ang laki ng problema ng mga migranteng manggagawa at itong konsulado lamang sa lahat ng konsulado ng US ay nagsabing mag-self-deport na lang ang kanilang mga migranteng mamamayan. Ngayon, habang papalapit ang Administrasyong Trump, may mga bagong banta ng deportasyon sa ating mga komunidad. Ang mga employer ay lalong magiging malupit at mas ipapalakas sa mga anti-migrant policies na naglalayong takutin ang mga migranteng manggagawa at pigilan sila magsalita at ipaglaban ang kanilang mga karapatan. Dahil sa takot na ma-deport, mas lalo pang mananakawan ng sahod ang mga migranteng manggagawa sa tulong ng banta ng mga care home owner na tatawagin nila ang ICE. Ngunit hindi po kami tumitigil sa pag-oorganisa. Ang aming organisasyon kasama ang mga aliado ay puspusan nag-outreach sa mga care home, kada linggo at nagsasagawa ng mga legal clinics at know your rights trainings upang turuan ang mga manggagawa tungkol sa kanilang mga karapatan. Nagbibigay din kami ng mga workshops upang matulungan silang pag-navigate ng mga sitwasyon kung sakaling may raid sa kanilang care home o kung sila man naaarestuhin ng ICE sa kanilang bahay o sa kanilang komunidad. Ang mga caregiver rin mismo ang mga leader sa pagbuo ng pinakaunang Residential Care Facility Advisory Council sa buong US, isang hakbang upang mabigyan ng boses ang mga migranteng manggagawa. Patuloy nilang tinutulungan ng kanilang mga kapwa caregiver na magsanib puwersa laban sa mga pagsasamantala ng kanilang mga employer. Sa kabila ng lahat ng pagsubok, hindi kami titigil sa pagsusulong ng karapatan ng bawat migranteng caregiver at manggagawa. Patuloy kami maghahanap ng paraan upang matamo ang makatarungang kalagayan para sa lahat ng Pilipino migranteng manggagawa, lalo na ang mga caregivers na nagsisilbing mga bayani ng ating komunidad. Maraming salamat.
Thank you, Veronica, for highlighting the need for Filipino migrant workers to come together, especially during this time. It's a very crucial time for migrant workers to come together to really help each other when faced against state neglect, especially as we enter into an even more aggressive time with more anti-migrant policies under the upcoming Trump administration. For our next speaker is Angela Albay from Anakbayan Inland Empire. Angela will share about the Free Ligaya campaign and the urgent need to take action.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Angela Albay, and I'm speaking on behalf of Anakbayan Inland Empire. We're here as part of BAYAN USA's Defend Migrants campaign to call attention to the urgent plight of Filipino migrants, especially those who are undocumented, vulnerable to deportation, and facing further attacks in the upcoming Trump presidency. So one example of these systemic attacks on migrants is Ligaya Jensen. She's a Filipina migrant and a victim of this broken system. And like many of our kababayan, Ligaya came from a poor peasant family in the Philippines and was forced to leave her homeland just to survive. But while she was here abroad, Ligaya was in a vulnerable position as a migrant woman, and she was the victim of abuse and scams and exploitation. And in reporting her abuser to the FBI, she ended up being the one who was criminalized while he walks free. And after serving her sentence, she was immediately transferred to ICE detention due to her undocumented status, where she has been held for almost 6 years, which is far longer than her original sentence. So, Ligaya was detained within the Adelanto ICE Processing Center here in the Inland Empire, and it's a detention center that is owned by the private prison company Geo Group, which has profited off of detaining people in inhumane conditions. So Ligaya and others who have been detained in Adelanto have reported being forced to eat inedible food, experiencing medical neglect, sexual harassment, and also being sprayed with a toxic chemical called HDQ neutral during the pandemic. They've also been forced to work for just $1 a day, which is a clear form of exploitation. And despite these conditions, Ligaya has been extremely courageous in exposing the abuses within Adelanto ICE Processing Center. And because of this, she has faced retaliation, including solitary confinement, and as well as being transferred away from her community and her family to Eloy Detention Center in Arizona, where she said the conditions are just as bad, if not worse. And Ligaya has reached out to multiple elected officials and even the Philippine consulate to help her with her situation, but they refused to help her, claiming that they would not support any Filipino nationals who have been convicted of crimes. And this is really a betrayal of Ligaya and all migrants facing systemic violence and neglect, as we've heard from the previous cases as well. And just recently, Ligaya's immigration bond was denied without a hearing, as the judges refused to hear oral arguments. And so there's currently a deportation order against her. This is outrageous. Ligaya has been tortured and abused for almost 6 years, only to face deportation. This is not justice, this is cruelty. So as Anakbayan Inland Empire and part of the Shutdown Adelanto Coalition, we demand the immediate release of Ligaya Jensen so she can be reunited with her family and live with dignity. The release of all Filipino migrants in ICE detention who face systemic targeting and abuse, and an end to Geo Group's profit-driven exploitation of migrants and the immediate shutdown of the Adelanto ICE Processing Center. To our Kababayan and allies, now is the time to act. Migrants, including Filipino workers, are the backbone of economies here and in the Philippines. Yet they are criminalized, double punished, and denied their rights. We will not let this continue under the Trump presidency or under any administration. We will continue to fight alongside Ligaya and all migrants until they are free and able to live without fear of detention, deportation, or abuse. And we will not stop until we shut down the Adelanto ICE Processing Center and build a world where migrants are valued and protected, and where people are not forced to migrate in the first place. Thank you.
Salamat, Angela. You know, the conditions that Ligaya has faced are very cruel and inhumane, and therefore we must continue to fight alongside Ligaya to free Ligaya. Similar to Ligaya, Alma Bowman was also another example of someone who was detained for almost 3 years, and even though she has been released, still continues to face hardship due to legal restrictions. We are and will continue to fight for Filipinos who have been wrongfully detained. For our next speaker, let us welcome Nerissa Allegretti, President of the National Alliance for Filipino Concerns, or NAFCON, and also a convener of the Filipino American Agenda. She will share about the community responses to Trump's policies and the power of community action. Welcome, Nerissa.
Magandang araw sa ating lahat. I am Nerissa Allegretti, a Chicago-based health worker and community organizer, and currently the president of the National Alliance for Filipino Concerns, or NAFCON. NAFCON is an action-oriented national alliance of Filipino organizations, institutions, and individuals in the U.S. that responds to issues of Filipinos in the U.S. and in the Philippines. It was founded in 21 years ago, in December of 2021. Since the first quarter of this year, NAFCON was one of over 20 conveners of the Filipino American Agenda, a platform that highlights issues and concerns of our community. Among the points raised in the agenda were immigration, workers' rights, and access to healthcare. We engaged over 2,000 kababayan who came together not only to discuss our problems, but on how to solve them. And we were united on the importance of organizing to build our strength. It is very timely to put into action the PhilAm agenda. President-elect Trump declared to deport millions as soon as he is inaugurated into office on January 20. Last December, his border czar, Tom Homan, was in Chicago, and in an interview, he said deportation operation will start in Chicago. In California, NAFCON member organizations like the Filipino Migrant Center and the Filipino Community Center are receiving numerous calls from kababayans almost every day asking for help. On the other hand, Ambassador Romualdez insensitive remarks advising undocumented Filipinos to self-deport is heartless and irresponsible. We, the community and organizations like NAFCON and other immigrant organizations, will face this situation fearlessly. as shown from our experience in the past when we organized against the anti-immigrant policies and repressions that happened after 9/11, when Filipinos were laid off from their jobs in the airports because they were not US citizens, and when we were among the millions in 2006 who mobilized against and defeated the Sensenbrenner bill, which attempted to criminalize the status of being undocumented. Magkaisa tayong lahat, magkaisa tayo at kumilos. Together, let us defend our kababayan and keep the bayanihan spirit alive. So long. Thank you.
Thank you, Marissa, for sharing the importance of unity and keeping that bayanihan spirit alive and taking action together by getting involved with the Defend Migrants campaign network, especially to unite together to continue the fight and prevent deportations of our kababayan in the past, including Larry Nicholas in 2018. And just a reminder to folks, if folks have any questions, feel free to send them to our questions collector. It is an honor now for me to introduce our next speaker. Coming from the Philippines is Liza Maza, the Makabayan Coalition President and a Senatorial candidate for the midterm 2025 Philippine election. Liza wasn't able to attend here today, but she sent a video, and she also has a strong track record of representing overseas Filipinos and abroad. We can go ahead, next slide.
Magandang araw sa inyo. Good day to everyone. I should have been here live, but we are preparing for a grand salubong for Mary Jane Veloso's early morning arrival at the NAIA Airport today. We want to show Mary Jane our warm welcome and convey to her the message that we will continue to support her until she gets the full and absolute justice that she deserves. Mary Jane is not a criminal, but a victim of human trafficking. Actually, Mary Jane's case is not an isolated one. As a leader of Gabriela Women's Alliance, I have personally been in touch with women victims of trafficking since the 1990s, which inspired me to author the Anti-Trafficking in Persons Act when I became a congresswoman representing Bayan Muna from 2001 to 2004. But even with the passage of this law, which aims to protect victims and stop trafficking, the situation in the Philippines, which spawns trafficking, continued to worsen. In the midst of economic crisis, widespread corruption involving billions of pesos, political repression, and worsening political crisis as well, poverty and inequality intensify, resulting to increasing number of reported victims of trafficking. According to DSWD, they assisted more than 2,000 trafficked persons in 2023. 1,800 each year in 2022 and 2021, and 1,500 in the year 2000. I don't see this as an improvement in government service, but more of an indication of increasing number of trafficked persons. Obviously, there were many more victims that were not given assistance, those that are undocumented. Every year, the number of Filipinos that go abroad to work increases. Likewise, the number of Filipinos who become vulnerable to traffickers also increases. But of course, the biggest factor that causes trafficking is the labor export policy of the government itself, not the crime syndicates, because most cases of trafficking go through the legal channels like the Department of Labor and Employment, POEA, etc. Now, the Department of Migrant Workers has been establishing many offices across the globe and advertising Philippine labor like having a subasta or sale. as long as the government sees our labor and bodies as commodities for sale from which it can gain revenues. Through OFW remittances and other exactions, the labor export program will continue to be the government's milking cow. The statement of Philippine Ambassador to the U.S., Jose Romualdez, who advised the 200,000 to 300,000 or even more undocumented Filipinos to self-deport ahead of the deportation order from Trump, speaks of the Philippine government's neglect and lack of political will to support and assist its nationals who are in distress. Instead of consulting with the Filipino community and those who will be affected, the embassy officials held meetings in secret to discuss implementation of Trump's policy against migrants. This is why it is important that the Filipino community close ranks, organize, and mobilize to assert your human rights and rights as undocumented migrants. Next year will be the Philippine elections, and Makabayan Coalition will be fielding 11 senatorial candidates, and I'm honored to be one of them, and 4 party list organizations. The Makabayan platform aims to provide immediate economic relief to the poor and underserved, like increase in minimum wage to 1,200 pesos daily. The economic programs that we promote will address the call of the OFW and migrants for trabaho sa Pinas, hindi sa labas. As an activist and advocate of OFW rights and welfare, I am pushing for the provision of refugee centers, legal assistance, and support for Filipinos in distress, including the undocumented Filipinos overseas. The government should be able to ink bilateral agreements with the host countries to be able to protect the rights of our nationals abroad. The labor export policy should stop, and in its place, a comprehensive economic, political, and social economic reforms should be instituted. But this will only happen with an informed, united, and organized citizenry who will push for these changes together with Makabayan. Salamat po.
Maraming salamat, Lisa, for emphasizing that even in reforms via bills to fight against trafficking, cases of trafficking continue to increase because of the worsening economic conditions back home and the continuation of the labor export policy. The fight for Filipino migrants is not just in the US, it is all over the world. And the fight for justice for Mary Jane Veloso continues. And without the fight of Filipino people coming together, led by Migrante International, the Philippine government would have not taken any actions to have Mary Jane come home. So thank you, Lisa, for sharing today. For our last speaker, it is Lester Ramos. Lester is a human trafficking survivor and is the current Deputy Secretary General of Migrante USA. Kuya Lester.
Thank you, Freddie. I'm Lester from Migrante USA. Migrante USA is a migrant workers organization that fight for the rights and welfare of Filipino migrant workers here in the USA and for Filipino all over the world with Migrante International. Before I became an organizer for Migrante, I was human trafficking survivor. I paid $6,000 to work here, but when I arrived, the promised job was not true, and I was separated from my family for over 8 years. I am one of the 10 of millions of Filipinos who leave our country to seek jobs in other countries. We were forced to leave and were separated from our families because we wanted to support them and survive. due to increasing unemployment and a worsening economic crisis in the Philippines. Working abroad is one way for us to survive. But if only there were good opportunities in the Philippines, we would have prepared to stay there with our families. Instead, the Philippine government carries forward the labor export policy that was instituted by Marcos and continues 50 years later under his son. Under this policy, the Philippine government exports its people abroad as cheap labor and relies on them to keep the economy afloat. More than 6,000 Filipinos go abroad every day and are left in the vulnerable situation where the Philippine government does not lift a finger. Due to the various circumstances, many of our kababayan here in the USA have lost the means to pursue their legal status. Most of them became vulnerable to abuse and exploitation of their employers. But even when led to that condition, they had no choice but to endure and sacrifice because the lives of their families back home depended on it. Many our kababayan lost their legal status because they were victims of labor and human trafficking, and they have used that lending companies in the Philippines that exploit them and make them pay huge fees to go abroad. They cannot return home because they are still paying for their debts. How will they come home if they know that they have no job and be in debt? That's why when I heard Jose Romualdez's statement that those without papers should self-deport without offering any support or work assurance when they return to the Philippines, I was really disappointed. This just proved that we cannot rely on the Philippines government. Historically, we have continued to be neglected by our government, despite of our huge contribution to the Philippine economy. Our kababayan are experiencing exploitation and severe abuses, but our consulate has become blind and deaf to address their issue and very help even when there is supposed to be an assistance to national program. If we don't have reliable protection or help from our government, who can we count on, especially with the threat of the incoming government here in the USA? We can only count on each other. We need to come together and strengthen our movement to oppose the threat of mass deportation. We need to work together with other migrants of different nationalities here in the USA. Let's consolidate our demands and objection to mass deportation because we know if it causes great suffering to our kababayan who were forced to leave their homeland for the sake of their families. It is a certain that not only the migrants but also their families will suffer. Our unity and resistance will save us from the threat of mass deportation and attacks of migrants and help us to fight for a society where we are not forced to migrate. We also need to unite with our kababayan back home to fight for a country that does not export us. That means to fight against joblessness and poverty and for national industrialization and genuine land reform. Right now, we must also fight for the family living wage so our family back home can survive as prices continue to soar. And the government does not prioritize basic needs and services accessible to the people. We will not give up and we will continue to fight until our voices are heard. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kuya Lester, for emphasizing that we have to oppose and really fight against the threat of mass deportation in the U.S. Because the reality is that every day Filipinos leave the Philippines to find work abroad and are often left in vulnerable conditions with little to no support from the Philippine government. And so with that, with all the speakers that we really listened to for this morning, let's really continue to unite and insert our demands to fight for the better futures for our kababayan all around the world. For the next portion of our program for this morning, we'll get into a question and answer Q&A. If folks haven't sent in their questions yet, questions are still welcome that you can send to our questions person via the chat. So we'll first start with first question for today is for Kuya Lester, actually. Can you comment on the Philippine consulate meeting that recently happened on December 10th through the 11th, where they discussed the Philippine government's response without the input of the community?
Sorry, I missed that. Is that me? For me?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Can you repeat the question?
You can also send it in the chat. The question is, can you comment on the Philippine consulate's meeting that recently happened on December 10th to 11th, where they discussed the Philippine government's response without input of the community?
Yes, I've been asking them the schedule when they gonna meet, and they always answering they didn't know yet, and that's the schedule when it's happen. But actually, when our force also rallying outside of the consulate, we didn't know that the meeting is already happening inside. So it's really frustration with our part, how they can address the issue without hearing, the voice of the migrant workers, not hearing our demand, not hearing what our condition. So it's like talking about that without knowing what's really our demand. It's like really a frustration in our part. Yeah.
Thanks, Kuya Lester. I think just to add to that too, there have been other people that they've invited, like the Department of Defense of the U.S. Um, and Department of Trade missions, instead of really prioritizing, like what Kuya Lester have said, the voices of, the most impacted, which are the Filipino migrants. Okay. Just wanted to add that. And also, a next question is, what are ways the Filipino community is uniting to address the issue, and how can the people be plugged in? I think this would be a good question, siguro, for Tita Narisa. So, what are ways the Filipino community is uniting to address the issue, and how can people be plugged in?
First, I would like to share our meeting last night. Last night, NAFCON had an all leaders meeting, but it was also open to the community. And we were discussing how to be a part of or be one of the conveners of the Defend Migrants campaign, Tanggol Migrante, where nationwide, we are trying to broaden our reach as far as we can with different Filipino organizations so that we can plan together a systematic and organized way of protecting our community from these attacks. So part of that will be, it was already kind of mentioned earlier by one of our speakers, like the documentation, know our rights, different scenario setting, like how to respond to the different scenario of the raids and repression. And take note that our kababayan are not criminals. So this is really, to be straightforward, this is a racist attack also on people of color and immigrants. We are being made as a scapegoat of many things, no? So we should put that in mind. And so when we say scenario setting against raids or possible repression, it's a preparation to defend ourselves, not because we are criminals, but because we are asserting our rights. And we need to be, our attitude should have been like a righteous indignation of this kind of attacks. So that's why we need to be prepared. And we're launching the Tanggol Migrante I think somewhere here in our discussion, it would be good if we will have the website, the link, and then the other, I think like there's like a code where people can go to and connect, no? So that this is more like the nationwide where NAFCON, Migrante, BAYAN, and other organizations, Kabataan Alliance, are plugged in. But I would like to share that here in Chicago, we are also starting with the Rapid Response Team because, as I said earlier, Tom Homan, the border czar, was here last week, and he said Chicago will be the first one for deportation operation. So it's very important to be highly organized and equip ourselves. So this rapid response team or this rapid response is 24/7. There should be someone always taking note of calls from kababayan so that we can trace right away where they are, where they're taken, and how we can help. I think that's the main point that I have.
Yeah, I just want to add a little bit, right? A lot of our kababayan is really scared right now in that threat bus deportation. But yeah, it's okay to be scared, but being scared only and doing nothing is makes them more vulnerable. So I will ask them that, yeah, come and join us, and we need to strengthen our movement and fight together, fight and yeah, for our kababayan who really scared is right. There's a different organization that really wants to help them and protect them. And just yeah, come together and we will fight together. Thank you.
Any other speakers want to share response to the question and what are ways the Filipino community is uniting? Okay, if none additions, there's a few more questions here that was compiled. Sally, do you want to ask the next question?
Yes. Our next question is, what are the impacts of Trump's policies on kababayan in the Philippines, including those that would like to immigrate here? And this question is for Jackie, but again, for the speakers, feel free to also chime in any of the questions.
Thank you, Sally. Yeah, just a few thoughts for this one. The impacts of Trump's policies on kababayans in the Philippines. For one, I think we'll see that many kababayan may return home, right? Either because of their own choice, sort of responding to this call to go home, or if they do face deportation proceedings. And so they will really need a lot of support for repatriation from the Philippine government. And, you know, in the broader scope and a more systematic scope, there needs to be a better economic system in the Philippines that will provide jobs so that they don't feel forced to leave to work abroad. But as long as that labor export policy persists, as Liza Maza was talking about earlier, you'll find that more unscrupulous agencies, recruitment agencies, will resort to trafficking our kababayan to work abroad. And what is trafficking? We kept mentioning it. Just to define it very quickly, it is recruitment or hiring people through the use of force, fraud, or coercion, basically making people feel like if they don't do the work that they are supposed to do, that they will face some sort of harm, and that they're forced to do some kind of work that is involuntary. So involuntary servitude, forced labor, debt bondage, meaning you took out a lot of loans to get this job and need the work to pay it back, or simply experiencing slavery, not getting paid for the work that you do. And so at MEMS, we've been doing a lot of research about how recruitment agencies in the Philippines draft their recruitment listings. And we want to warn, prospective migrants to look out for the top 5 red flags for trafficking and recruitment. If these recruitment agencies are naming an unrealistic wage, that's a red flag. If there's a lack of job description in the listing, that's a red flag, because they could try and make you do work that you didn't agree to do. Any promises for fast-tracked immigration offers, especially during a really strict immigration policy that the Trump administration is offering. If these recruitment agencies are offering something fast-tracked, that should be a red flag. If they're asking for any payment in exchange for more information about the listings, that's another red flag. And lastly, if they don't have a large social media presence, if you can't sort of hear from other migrants that these are legitimate recruitment agencies, then we should be wary of them. Other things to expect are the increased use of guest worker visas for migrants who do want to work in the United States. They will be much stricter, I think, in what kind of the application process is. And like Lester mentioned earlier, people have been losing their status as a result of being trafficked, and a Trump administration sort of, we can look forward to delays in humanitarian visas like the T visa for trafficking survivors or any victims of crime. So I think Kababayan just need to be very prepared and keep good record of the promises that potential employers and recruiters are giving to them, so that they can defend themselves later if they are fighting a trafficking case. Other things that Filipino migrants should do to prepare for these policies is to conduct Know Your Rights trainings, and also train others to do these trainings, to arm the community with their rights, to resist harsh immigration policies. But while knowing our rights is really important, we can expect that the U.S. government, as it's done before, may unabashedly break the law and violate people's rights anyway. So just another emphasis that migrant workers must get organized at this time here in the US and also in the Philippines before they depart, organize with our families to learn the system, to be critical of the messages from the government, from recruitment agencies. And if our loved ones are unfortunately in detention, we have to visit them and keep their spirits up and ensure that their basic needs are met, and advocate with local governments and the governments of our home countries to step in and protect us. And even if they refuse, we have proven time and time again that organizing to protect ourselves is our best weapon right now. Thank you.
Thanks, Jackie. We have a couple more questions here. I'll read one, and this is for all our speakers. Do we really have to be that concerned compared to the Mexican Latinx community about this mass deportation issue as Trump starts taking office again next month? It's a question for all our speakers. Anyone want to start us off? Again, the questions, do we really have to be concerned compared to the Mexican Latinx community about the mass deportation?
Hey everyone, I can speak on that issue as part of the Shutdown Adelanto coalition. So it's really like a coalition of like a lot of different organizations from different backgrounds, and really from that experience we've seen that the mass deportation issue and the criminalization of migrants and detention of migrants really affects like all communities. And because we've worked with people from like Southeast Asia, Latin and Central America, as well as Africa, and just from really all over the world who have been affected by immigration detention. But I also just wanted to bring up some info that might be helpful. But Trump deported 3,500 Filipinos under his first administration. And then Trump also deported around 1.5 million migrants total under his first term. But J.D. Vance has threatened deportation of 1 million migrants per year. And even 3,500 of our Kababayan is really significant and not okay. And we should definitely be concerned about this. And especially since this will be the second time that Trump will be in office. So who knows what will happen this time. So yeah, like through our work with like shutting down the detention centers and advocating for our kababayan like Ligaya, we've also been working with in IMA, the International Migrants Alliance, in not just in California, but in Washington and Oregon and like all over the US. And so we're, joining like deportation defense coalitions and also coalitions to shut down like the detention centers, such as Adelanto, the Northwest Detention Center in Washington, and then previously Elizabeth in New Jersey. So those coalitions have existed before Trump, but BAYAN has always been a part of, this organizing, and has always been part of like defending and being in solidarity with migrant struggles. So yeah, just wanted to share that that's one of the ways that we're standing up for our kababayan.
Can I also add to that as well? Like the we have like I mentioned earlier, trainings for migrants in our community to be able to protect themselves against like raids at their workplaces or being arrested by ICE on the street or at their homes. And part of that is actually because of the previous Trump administration, we have gained this practice of having like a rapid response network with Defend the Community, where largely it's us like practicing with the Latinx community of actually like supporting our migrant community in these situations, like encouraging US born or natural born citizens to be first responders for documentation and supporting like affected migrants like families, and also even advocating for reallocate like allocation of funds in our local county to be sent to like legal support for these deportation cases. So and it's really because like since like the last like Trump administration, like we've seen that his policies are largely anti-migrant with no distinction of like ethnicity or nationality, right? And so we're also like we should also expect like a spike of like Asian hate as well in this upcoming year. So really that's how we in the area like found strength in like helping our migrant community, not just like mga migranteng Filipino, but also like developing like these protective practices with all the migrants in our communities.
Yeah, I would also like to add on that. With the experience of NAFCON since 2003, we have experienced already several attacks or repression on immigrants. And this one, hindi ito Latino, Mexicano, or South Asian. This time around, this is really very serious. In our experience in Chicago, Chicago is a sanctuary city, and then the state is also sanctuary. But it still happened because ICE is under the federal government. So our experience during the first term ni Trump, what ICE did is to go to the Union Station, look into the IDs of people, the Greyhound bus, stop nila. So, halo-halo yan. Merong Filipino that tinulungan namin, meron ding mga Latino, and we really know what's going on because we are part of coalition, and then we exchange information. So that's why it's important as communities we organize, because there's already a bigger coalition, and then each community try to also organize their community. So when Tom Homan came here for a Christmas party on December 9, and he said Chicago is the first area where the operation of deportation will happen. Of course, they can always deploy all the ICE people from the federal government, because ready na ang Chicago, the Chicago police and the state police, even the university na mga police department will not be cooperating. So they need to deploy more people. But specifically, they're attacking the blue states because that's how he is, and or the people with him. Kaya this is really very serious, and we've experienced things before, but we need to really prepare. That's why even if we are in the Christmas season, masarap ang mga buhay sana for Christmas party. Meron tayong mga kababayan. I had like someone call me last night na parang napraning. Ang sabi pa nga, worse pa ito sa COVID, ang stress nito. And to think that ang Christmas, ang lesson ng Christmas sa atin mga Kristiyano is actually ang buhay ng first or the Holy Family, the first family na nag-travel at kaya pinanganak siya sa manger, is actually the what's going on right now sa attacks on migrants. The migrants is a symbol of the first family. And I don't know how Christian the supporters of Trump are, because they're saying that, but it's only according to their definition of the racist attitude behind that. So walang dito, cut across, maski citizen ka, pwede ka i-denaturalize. Ang mga green card na may mga kaunting record, pwede yan, lahat ng mga kind of visa. So marami ang talagang uneasy ang sitwasyon na to. I have spoken to a family last Saturday when we have an emergency meeting and Know Your Rights training. They are also preparing the family na for the parents to be deported because the kids were born here, parang ganon. So, but they wanted to organize, and they're even applying to become members of Migrante. There's also that attention na sa mga kwan. So, we should really spread out the news, and i-ano natin ang Defend Migrants campaign, palawakin ang Tanggol Migrante. Thank you.
I think I just want to add, more support and emphasis on building multiracial and multi-ethnic coalitions in the immigrant rights movement. Just to share, Denmark, whose campaign we're supporting right now, when he was first arrested, the racial category that was checked off in his records was actually Latino. So it's clear that the law enforcement agencies don't quite care to do the work to really distinguish among different migrant groups. They're very careless about it, as long as this aim to repress and oppress and exclude immigrant workers from this country is achieved. And the importance of why we need to build cross-ethnic and cross-racial coalitions in this moment is that the harshness against the Latino community sets a precedent against us and other immigrant communities. And we should not let the Trump administration or any policy divide us across ethnic lines. And we have a rich history of labor organizing, of migrant worker organizing between the Filipino and Latinx communities, like the United Farm Workers. We are living in a different context now, but that shared strength and resilience and organizing power is something that we should uphold. Thank you.
Thank you to all of our speakers for this morning, for really talking about the current conditions that our migrants are facing, not only here for our Filipino community, but really all of the migrants who will be impacted, especially under this upcoming Trump administration this upcoming year. This actually concludes our Q&A for this portion. Thank you all again for sending in your questions. We will now go into our closing with Freddie.
Thanks, Sally. And can we get slides back up, please? Yeah, thank you again, everyone. Thank you for our speakers for really emphasizing, right, the need to continue to fight, to collectively fight. And, you know, as International Migrants Day is coming up tomorrow, we will be taking more actions all throughout this week, tomorrow. And so let our voices be heard loud and clear. And really, I want to emphasize in our closing that our calls to action are to, unite and organize to defend migrants, protection, hindi deportasyon, at end the family separation, to end forced migration, and to end the labor export policy. And so next slide, we again would like to bring everyone together to join the Tanggol Migrante Network. You can see here the listserv. You go to tinyurl.com, DMCNET work, DMC Network. And if you use the QR code, you can also learn more information about how to create the network in your areas. And yeah, let's come together nationally. Next slide. Here are resources that you can go to, be a part of the Defend Migrants campaign. Go to the BAYAN USA website and go to the Defend Migrant Workers to learn more how you can get involved. Attend activities for International Migrants Day tomorrow in your local areas. And also contact our organizations and partners if you or anyone you know may be at risk of deportation. So there's information here if you'd like to take a picture of them. Migrante USA, Mission to End Modern Slavery, Filipino Community Center in San Francisco, Filipino Migrant Center in Southern California, and Filipino BAYAN Center in Portland, Oregon. Next slide. And Lisa talked about, welcoming Mary Jane back home today. And our fight continues, right? And we do want to get more petition signatures to appeal to President Marcos Jr. for the immediate clemency of Mary Jane's case, and based on the humanitarian grounds that Mary Jane is a victim of human trafficking. And so please share this a petition to our contacts, everyone in our areas to sign. And then the last slides, it was also mentioned earlier that, because of the conditions back home, right, are continuing for force Filipinos to leave for jobs abroad. And so there's also a campaign for family living wage in the Philippines, really calling Filipino overseas, calling for a family living wage in the Philippines to be 1,200 pesos daily minimum wage in the private sector and 33,000 pesos monthly minimum wage in the public sector nationwide to ensure that, our families back home and are meeting their basic needs. And so this fight is also part of our fight here, as it is connected to why, again, our kababayan, us, have been forced to leave our country. Yeah, that ends our program for today. Thank you, everyone, for joining our press conference. And yeah, tuloy ang laban. Let's fight together. Thank you. Have a good day.